That looks good. So, the talk is about web components. And what I wanted when doing this talk was not to throw at you like bulk of code, screens with syntax after syntax after syntax. It was more about an introductory talk that will make you understand what web components are and how they will help us develop in the future, what will change in our flow, in our development flow. And a little disclaimer before we start. I am kind of addicted to 9gag. I really love it. I read it every day. And that's why this presentation will do a heavy use of memes. But being true to the spirit of 9gag, feel free to make any kind of criticism. I will accept it. Okay, so to start with, how many of you here have actually heard the term web components? Okay, a lot, I guess. How many of you actually used web components? 2. Yeah. And can you actually provide a definition for web components? No. That's the thing with web components. Everybody hears the word, or at least a lot of people hear the word web components, but nobody actually knows what they are, right? So, I was trying to figure out the definition, and the closest thing I came to the definition is actually this. For me, web components are a set of standards that came from W3C, of course, that aim to give us some tools to develop our own HTML elements, our own tags, that offer encapsulation and easy redistribution. I hope that doesn't sound gibberish to you.
It's not like XML.
No.
Without tags.
The only thing they have common with XML is that you can write any tag you want, but basically the similarities end somewhere there.
I'm just going to stay quiet.
So, why web components? That's the first question that we need to answer. What is so cool about them? Why everybody is talking about them? And for me, it's pretty simple. I don't know how many of you recognize this snippet of code. This is the smallest snippet you need from Twitter Bootstrap in order to show a modal window. So if you write a modal window with Twitter Bootstrap, you need to write these things. If web components were fully used, you would need to write this. So I think that's enough of a reason to say that web components are something that will be of use. Basically, it will give us a tool to reduce our code and make it easier to use. Components of web components. Like I said, web components are a set of standards. There is a working draft in W3C called Introduction to Web Components, and that working draft describes 4 different specifications. Shadow DOM. Shadow DOM is basically a tool that gives us encapsulation over the DOM tree. Templates. Templates are patterns that we can reuse among the document and print the same things again and again without writing them. Custom elements. Custom elements are our reusable elements like we saw before in this slide, like the X model that we saw before. And finally, imports. Imports is our way of importing a document within another document. And if anyone has read the introduction to web component spec, he will see that there is another thing that's called decorators. Unfortunately, decorators are only described in the introduction to web components draft, but they do not have a specification of their own. In plain terms, not having a specification means that no browser will ever implement them because no browser knows what will happen with them. So you might find a little bit of info about decorators, but no browser will support them yet. So let's start by taking a deeper look in each one of those components, and we'll start with the Shadow DOM. Shadow DOM. Like I said, the thing with the Shadow DOM is that it offers DOM tree encapsulation. Let's think one of the major problems that we have in development. If you write something, the model window that we saw from Bootstrap, and you include some CSS with it, and you try to get your friend to put it in his project, how sure are you that no CSS of yours will interfere with your friend's CSS? How sure you are that the JavaScript that you write doesn't interfere with his JavaScript? And vice versa. How sure you are that his JavaScript doesn't change something in your model and breaks it. The concept of having a module that's totally cut off from the outside and operates like an autonomous unit is called encapsulation, and that's what the Shadow DOM eventually offers us. The truth is that Shadow DOM is not far away from here. I don't know how many of you have used the video element in HTML, but basically you just use a tag that's called video, you give it a source, and then you see something like that on the page. And this is a full-blown play, right? You can click play and you'll see the video, you will see keyword sound, etc., etc. But in the markup, you only see the video tag. And if you go to the browser, you only see, if you go to the inspector tools, you only see a video. The truth though is that there are a lot more things behind. So if you actually enable an option in your Chrome inspector tools that says show Shadow DOM and you inspect the video, you see something like that. You see something called shadow root, and shadow root is everything that's hidden from the browser. So in that shadow root, you can actually see input type button, input type range, and the range is, for example, the time where the video is at the moment, or the button is the play button and everything, which you cannot see anything else. It's basically hidden behind the shadow. Now, Shadow DOM is actually being used by the browsers, and like the video element, but there are also many more elements that actually use it. There's a date picker already that's starting.
Simple select uses it.
Huh?
Simple select element is big.
So, like we said, date picker, range, audio, video, a lot of elements, but if you think that all the new elements only use it because these are kind of newer elements, you are kind of wrong. And it's exactly what Carlos said basically, because this concept has been in the browsers for a long time. The select. Even if it's not exactly a Shadow DOM, but the concept of encapsulations have been in the browsers for some time. And basically, the only thing that we can have as a conclusion from that is that browsers are scumbags. They have encapsulation for some time, but they don't give it to us until now, of course. And that's where the Shadow DOM comes. The key terms from Shadow DOM that you need to understand, there are many more, of course, but the key terms are the shadow root and the shadow host. Basically, to put it simple, shadow host is the element that you write for the DOM, the element that you use, and shadow root is the root element where all the other stuff will be appended. If we go back to our example, here the shadow host is the video element, while the shadow root is the first thing that you see there. So, I said that I won't give you long examples of code, but a little bit a quick start guide for each of the specs. I don't know how clear it is. Basically, you just choose the element that you want to make your shadow host, and you run the function create shadow root on that element. After that, anything you put in the root is in the shadow DOM. It's simple as that. Next one, templates. Templates are patterns. Like we all know the concept of templates. We all use it in our elements. You want to print a list, and you don't want to write the same li again and again and again. So you have a string somewhere. You get the string. You replace some variables in the string, and you print it out as many times as you want. Or you use some of the public libraries like masters or handlebars, and that's okay. But that's the way that we work until now. But these solutions have problems. First of all, they are not as performant as having something native, and they are not as intuitive. Sometimes you need to know different syntax for its library. You go to another project and use a different library. You need to learn that syntax, etc., etc. So that's where the web components come, and they give us a native way of defining and using templates. Key term. The basic thing to understand about templates is that they are inert. Basically, when I define a template, everything that I put in the template doesn't execute until the time I use it. So, if I have a script tag inside the template, that JavaScript will not run. If I have any operation that I want in there, images that have some source, that image will not come to the browser until I use a template. And defining a template is quite simple. You just use the element template, and then to use the element, to use the actual template, you just need to clone the node. Sorry?
You can close it, the tag template.
It does close, but unfortunately my highlighter put it on.
Okay, yeah.
Custom elements. I'd say custom elements are the golden boys of web components. Basically, most people, when they hear about web components, think of custom elements, and they are more or less what we saw at the first example. A custom element is the X model thing here. Basically, a custom element gives us the ability to define our own elements that have specific functionality, that carry some style, that can do whatever you want. Using them is basically like creating a class on any backend language, I'd say. Like if you had Java, or if you wrote PHP or Ruby or whatever, you define a class, and then you go ahead and instantiate the class. It's exactly the same here with custom elements. You first have to register the element, which is the equivalent of defining a class, and then whenever you want, you can use the element, and this creates an instance. You can use the element either by using the attribute is, or by using the actual element name as a tag. They are very good. So, if you start googling around and you see things here and there, you might find a declarative definition. Basically, instead of using JavaScript to define the class that we talked about earlier, you might see this definition with the element tag. The truth is that the draft originally included this, but browsers said this is too hard to implement. We are freezing it. So this was never implemented. Using them is actually equally easy. Like I said, you register the element. You can extend other elements if you want. So you can create your model, and then you can create your sliding model that actually extends the original element. And using them, apart from the way we already saw with the markup, you can also insert them with JavaScript. And finally, imports. What are imports? If you think about it, when we are writing a markup, when we are writing an HTML document, we have ways to import our CSS. We put a link tag, we give a specific href, and it gets the CSS file from there. If we want to include some JavaScript file in our HTML5, you put a script tag with a source. If you want to include an image, you put an image with a source, and the browser knows and fetches the corresponding document, the corresponding resource, sorry. But for HTML, nothing existed until now. So the most simple thing, like including a document in another document, didn't exist, and this is what imports can solve. It's basically resource loading for HTML, and it has a number of advantages. First of all, it doesn't block page parsing. So, yes, exactly. That means faster rendering for browsers. Script is executed in the context of the important document. What does that mean, actually? When I said we didn't have a way of importing another HTML document, I wasn't exactly telling the truth, because we do have a way, and that way was called iframe. But how many people here like working with iframes? Good. I'm glad I didn't see the hands. Basically, they are hard to work with, and if you have an iframe, any JavaScript that you write doesn't execute in the context of your original document. It executes in its own context. This doesn't happen with imports. With imports, you have access directly to the context of the imported document. So any function that you actually register in the imported document goes in the window in the same context. And finally, the importing documents gives us onload and on-error events. Using it is as simple as that. You just put in your head the link tag with an a rel of import and the href of X model. The important thing to understand is that putting this thing in the head of the document doesn't mean that the browser will just go to the xmodel.html, get all the HTML and print it out there. It doesn't. It just makes it available for the browser to use whenever he wants. It fetches all the resources basically. So, we saw the 4 different specs that are defined within the web components. And I hope that you understand each one of them gives you some tools to use. But the great power of web components comes if you combine everything. So, how do you combine them? You define your own custom element. Of course, you will use a template within that custom element, so all the JavaScript that you want and everything is in there, etc., until you instantiate the custom element. When you instantiate the custom element, you carefully place everything in the shadow DOM so you don't affect the rest of the page. And in the end, you just give the element to somebody else to use it via imports, or you use it in your own project via imports. And I don't know how many of you are old enough to notice the shadow of 90s nostalgia in this slide. So, question, are we componentized yet? The fact is that web components are well on the way of actually being used today. There is this great website, citing there, that gives you very detailed information about whether you can use web components and what each browser does. I'd say that we can start using them today in our projects. Of course, there are people always who disagree with me, but we'll see what we can do. There are always polyfills, of course, and there are 2 big polyfills for web components. The first one is called Polymer, and it's from Google, and it's actually more than a polyfill for web components. So Polymer gives you all the things that we described until now, but it also gives you a few more development tools. And it's also X-tags from Mozilla, which is actually less. It only polyfills the custom elements. Sorry, beer is good for everything. It only polyfills the custom elements, and it uses Polymer as a base as well. But basically, those are the only 2 polyfills available for us today. And some references. I think anyone who is interested in working with web components, the first thing that to do is actually read the introduction to web components from W3C. It's an excellent document, and it's a higher abstraction, so it doesn't get too deep into it. It's good for knowledge. Of course, I hope you know the website called HTML5 Rocks. It has at least 5 or 6 high-quality articles about web components. There's a great article in CSS Tricks, a guide to web components. And finally, Google is a good source, as long as you keep in mind that web components are a fast evolving spec. So whenever you find something in Google, try to see when it was written, because things might have changed by this time. And that's it. That was my introduction to web components. Thank you. Questions?